from an institutional point of view. So I wanted to know why some institutions, economics and political one, were more developed than the others. And basically what I did, it was to study the evolution of formal and informal institutions. Among those informal institutions that usually we use, we call it values, there were these social norms. So I started my first master degree in economics studying them. And from there, basically, I took off. So I decided to study it in the place where the measurement of social norms come from, that is at the University of Pennsylvania, under Professor Cristina Bicchieri, who is one of the most important scholars in this environment. And then I decided to apply social norms to several topics. Okay, I started with gender economics, and then I worked a little bit on paternity leave, corporate family responsibility, and now I'm working on social norms and environmental choice at the University of Carlos III. What I'm going to discuss with you today is trying to figure out with you what are social norms, why they are so important for this village especially, but also for any other village. And how can we measure social norms? What are the problems that social norms put us in front? And how can we somehow solve or think policy-making outcomes to solve social norms, okay? To solve the problems of social norms. First of all, we have to, if I have to tell you that if you want to interrupt me, during the conversation, if there is something that is not clear enough, you can interrupt me right away. And during the presentation, there is going to be also a little test that I would like you to take. So we're gonna move then to the Kahoot platform. I'm gonna send you the code and the link to participate, just to test whether or not I was good enough in describing some important concepts, okay? So now I'll move to my presentation. Okay, so can you see it? Okay. Okay, so of course the title was supposed to be catchy, because sometimes when we think about social norms, we always relate to problems that are very harmful for society, and we tend to see social norms, especially in particular layers of society. And I wanted to just point out that also the big role model that we might follow or we might know, even though they come from the United States, from a very apparently wealthy position, they actually have suffered of the presence of social norms. Social norms permeate our society, permeate our way of taking decision, our ability to see what are the actual possibility that then the market and the society and the political realm are really building for us. And this is something that is completely different from the actual possibility that we have, okay? It is extremely important that the perception of those possibilities sometimes are not the same as the objective possibility, okay? And this is extremely important. So why do we start with Michelle? So those are the quotes, some of the quotes that I've read or I have listened during an interview with Oprah, and read in her book, in her memoir, Becoming. I don't know if you had the chance to read it. I mean, I hardly suggest it. So what she says is basically is that she was a girl growing in the south side of Chicago. She belongs to a working class-led community that was for sure culturally and historically vibrant, but she always, from the beginning, always felt that her role as a woman, as a Black woman, was basically characterized by specific expectation identified by the society. Okay, the same expectation that she found in South Side Chicago, where, for example, in her high school teacher told her that she was not a Princeton material. She found the same expectation, the same social norms also when she moved to Princeton, and then after Princeton when she moved to Harvard for getting her law degree, and the same expectation when she started working at the Sidley Austin, a very well-known law firm. What were the expectations that she felt as a burden? What was the reality that the Princeton material, you are not a Princeton material, that was weighting her a lot? It was a problem. It was so those social norms were related to the fact that she was a Black, because she was from the South Side, because she was a woman, or because she has a family coming from a working class origin. All of them basically were important to her at the same time, but in every single step of her career, she has to face a different kind of expectation that the others have on her. And she didn't realize that basically until she started looking at the reality from a different point of view. And that is why the memoir is based on. At the same time, Melinda, always this quote I'm getting this quote from her last book, A Moment to Live. Melinda was coming from a different socioeconomic status. So she lived in Dallas. She had a Catholic family, white Catholic family. Her father was an engineer of the Apollo mission. She has the possibility to go to the university without anyone telling her what to do or who she was supposed to be. But then something changed her life when she had the first daughter. So I don't know if you know Melinda, she is also a computer scientist. At that time, girl computer scientists were like unicorns. And she came out from Duke University also with an MBA in Manhattan. So she was really a unicorn for that time. But then she has to face the reality of social norms when she got the first child. She said to Bill Gates, given the fact that now I'm pregnant, I'm going to quit my job, because this is what my mother did. This is what my friends told me and told me to do. This is what usually a woman does. And that was basically her not identifying these this affirmation as a social norms, but she was genuinely convinced that was her course of action. Later in the book, she really explained that she didn't have like an awakening call about the fact that her sentence was sound like a sentence based on social norms, but this is what happened to her. So if even those big figures have somehow figured out that the social norms were in their life, and they have all the means and the ability to see that through, how can we be able to help other people to see how social norms strive our life? So the first things that I wanted to introduce is the definition. Okay, let's start with the definition. I'm going to use the gender norm definition from the IGE, that is the European Institute of Gender Economics from the European Commission. So for the IGE, the gender norms are standards and expectations to which women and men generally conform within a range that defines a particular society, culture, and community at that point in time. So these standards and expectations, we are going to discuss a lot of standards and expectation, and we're going to discuss a lot about society, particular society, and particular culture, because what we think it is right in In Italy, already if we disaggregate what is right in Calabria, where I come from, in Rome and in Milan, we're gonna have a completely different menu of standards and expectations, okay? And it is about standards and expectation that social norms are built on. I'm going to use the definition of Cristina Bicchieri, just because she was my mentor, but of course there are other and more, let's say, a more theoretically technical definition of social norms, but this is the most practical one. And this is why I wanted to introduce you to this definition. So for Cristina, for Professor Bicchieri, sorry, social norms are the rules of behavior such that individual prefers to conform to that behavior on a condition that they believe that also other people in the reference network are going to conform, and they believe that other people ought to conform. I'm going to explain better this definition, because in this very concise definition, we have the 4 characteristics of a social norms. So I'm going to merge these two, but as you see, there are like a lot of buzzwords that we can use in the two realm, okay? Having said that, we have to figure it out. We have to consider that the problem of social norms in general and gender norms in particular is a problem that has to be analyzed in a sociological framework. What does it mean that? We mean that we need to evaluate the presence of norms and social and gender and their consequences on policy, people's life, and people's decision. Consider these 4 dimensions. A dimension that if we start from the yellow one, so from the bottom one, we go up on anti-clockwise direction. We start with the individual, in which we discuss what are the beliefs, the aspiration, the skills, the attitudes that belief have, and see whether those individual characteristics are basically analyzed or characterized in the social realm through social networks and support, availability the availability of role models, or through social capital levels. And then we move from the social parts to look at how much the social level basically is represented in the organization. So what are the formal institution or the organization or the service that somehow resemble those social characteristics? There might be the case that between organization and social level, there are a lot of differences. This is where the theory of economic of institution come basically of help. Sometimes what we do, we manipulate or we try to get better in the organizational realm without considering that the social level is not ready for that rule or for that kind of organization that we have thought. And if that is the case, the organizational decisions are going to be ineffective. And at the same time, when we look at the organization, we need to consider also at the macro level of political, economic, and social environments, how we institutionalize those rules. Is everything fine so far? Okay. For now, the first part of the presentation is going to analyze the first 2 layers, so the individual and the social layers. And then we're gonna add the institution and the organization, especially in analyzing a particular case of female genital mutilation. So we're gonna see how much this sociological framework is so important and needs to be integrated, not only in the analysis, but also when we decided to discuss a problem, we decide to inform a policy making, okay? First of all, if we look at gender norms, the first things that we observe is behavior, right? As I said, I'm an economist. So for me, the assumption of revealed preferences means that if I see someone doing A, I say that this someone is preferring to do A, okay? Of course, I move away from the orthodox way of thinking about economic models. I'm more a behavioral economist in that sense. So I realize that actually the behaviors and also the preference over that behavior are motivated by many other ingredients, are motivated by attitudes. So not only there are basically another word for preferences. They are motivated by affection. They are motivated by the way we reason, so by our condition. And they are motivated also by scripta and schema. Scripta and schema are basically the social categories that we build during our life while observing how the society behaves around us. Okay, so my social categories might be different from Federica's, they might be different from Olena's social categories, or might be different from Vanessa's social categories. Okay, so the first thing that we have to analyze, to consider, is that behavior is just the tip of the iceberg, and behind that we have a plethora of characteristics that we need to be aware of. Okay, so why I'm interested into this plethora of condition? Because I wanted to study how people think. And according to the report of the World Bank, the World Development Report of 2015, you see on the bottom left the references. And according also to this amazing article from Professor Hoff and Stiglitz, that people think through these three characteristics. People think in automatic way, in the sense that given that we have a lot of information, we have a lot of choice, what we do sometimes is to not actually assess all the information that we have, because we need to make a decision between how much information I can process and how much time to process it, or how much time to gather those information. I'm going to react upon this information in an automatic way. So I'm not going to optimize my decision making considering all the information available, but I will somehow satisfy my decision making, considering what other people are doing. So I'm going to decide upon what I've learned from my mother, from my friends, from my colleagues, from my professor. In the same situation, what did they do? And that is a shortcut that is going to allow me to save a lot of time, but at the same time to assess whether or not my decision it is socially acceptable. Okay, so that not only my preference is expressed into that decision, but it's also socially accepted. And that and this is when the second pillar, the social part of the decision making come in. So I might have convinced that a specific behavior, a specific decision is expressed not only in terms of my own preference over that behavior, but it is also a representation of my social preferences or my social networks or the role model I've been looking at, the social identity that action is basically is conveying. Okay, and that brings us to the third pillar, that is the mental model, meaning that the mental models are basically windows in our mind that allow us to see the world according to the categories that we have been learning in the socially pillar. Okay, so those are concepts, categories, identity, prototypes, stereotypes, narratives that basically we have been learning during our years. These mental models, what they do is basically they can reduce or expand the actual possibility that we have. What does it mean? It means that if I have a law that basically protects my rights to go to school, but I come from Pakistan, even though the law is there, I know that anyone and no one of my friends, my girlfriends, have gone to school. So that possibility for my mental model of a little Pakistani girl is completely out of the window, even though there is a law that actually is protecting my decision. And that was the problem with my Allah, for example. she had a mental model. It was too large for the mental models that the others in her community had. So the analysis of how people think through automatic reaction, through social representation, or through mental models are extremely important every time we assess that a problem has a gender problem, that a situation has a gender problem or has a social norm problem. Because we might arrive to that, to find solution to that problems with our mental model is completely different from the mental model of that situation. So it is extremely important that we know that. And of course, all this thinking, all this way of thinking are supported by this theory, basically. So this is the Cristina Bicchieri's Plain Theory as It Is from 2006, her first and important books on the grammar, called The Grammar of Society. And she said that basically the choice are expression of the preferences, and the preferences are expression of what? Of factual beliefs. There are beliefs about how the world works. There are expression of attitudes or personal normative beliefs, what we think is right or wrong in the world in general, and as expression of empirical and normative expectation. There are expectations that we have over what are the things that other people are going to do, or what are the expectations that the others have on us, okay? And these attitudes, factual beliefs, empirical and normative expectations, and script and stereotypes are basically endogenous all the time. They change themselves if we allow them to change. So let's identify each word with a specific meaning. So let's start with an attitude. What is an attitude? An attitude is an individual held belief that assess whether something is good, bad, sacred, it is a taboo, or otherwise, whatever you think, whatever is the objective that you want to add to, you want to characterize that belief. An attitude is different from a norm, because a norm is a collectively shared beliefs. So it's not just my belief that was an attitude, it's the beliefs that I have and share with all the people in the same network where I live, okay? And a norm basically represents what I feel, or what I think it is considered typical, appropriate, right, just in a given social setting, in a given social group. So I might think that a behavior is right in my circle of friends, but it could be completely different in my workplace. It could be completely different in my family, because these three groups are completely different groups, social groups, in which I learn what are the expectations of the others and what are the expectation that the others have on me. And then attitude and norms are completely different from behavior, because behavior is what actually people do. So even if the behavior part is actually the easiest part, because we can see what other people do, we don't know what are their attitudes, what are their norms. We don't know their motivation. And it is extremely important to know what are their motivation. Of course, we can make some assumption, but we have to be very sure that those assumptions apply to that specific case, okay? What happens when attitudes and behaviors, so what I feel that is right, it is what actually I'm going to do, or what I think it is right is not actually what I'm going to do. What if my attitudes, my personal belief is completely different from the behavior that I'm going to enact? If the two are basically coinciding, so the first, the left-hand side of the presentation, what we have is that attitudes and behavior sometimes match, and they reflect the norm, the social norms that is in the society. So I'm not going to school because I think that going to school is not a good thing for a girl, and I'm not going to school. So I'm just reinforcing the norm of that particular social group. So I'm again the little Pakistani girl. And I do believe that going to school is a waste of time, so I won't go, and I will reinforce that norms. But sometimes what happens is that people have attitudes that are completely different from the behavior they are going to enact. And sometimes either they are unaware of that, or they are just in an impossible situation to change their behavior, because otherwise they're going to be punished. Okay, and in that case, when we see that there are some discrepancies between an attitudes and behavior, and it is in that situation that we have a room for improvement somehow. Okay. For example, here you have some example. A man may believe that using physical violence to discipline his wife and children is harmful, so it is a bad thing, but a community level norm justify that beating, so he will decide to beat his wife and child. Or he might, if he's a trendsetter, he might decide not to behave according to the norm. Okay, so there is a possibility in which people have different attitudes with respect to the behavior, but there is also a possibility that people are not aware of that difference in attitude. They will always reply to you that this is how people do. And when that is the only justification of motivation, is it possible that their attitude is actually a different attitude from the norm, but they are not in a position in which they can choose to not follow the norm? Again, always identified, giving a definition. What are the beliefs? When we talk about beliefs, we enter into the realm of a lot of examples, in the sense that beliefs can be of two types. We have factual beliefs and personal normative beliefs. The factual beliefs are the beliefs about how the world is. We're gonna see some example later on. Personal normative beliefs of attitudes are our beliefs, the personal beliefs about what we think we should be, what is right, what is wrong, what is a taboo, and so forth. And then we have social expectations. They are beliefs, but they are not simple beliefs. They are expectation about what other people will do. So on some expectation about what is the behavior of the others in my specific network, and what are the expectations that other people have on us. So I expect from that Federica thinks that I am an economist and I'll behave as an economist. If I talk about social stuff, it might seem strange to her. So it might be that there is a social norms on how to behave as an economist. Okay, in that case, that expectation might inform my possibility to act, might reduce or improve. It depends, because we tend to look at social norms always in negative way, but we can also look at social norms in positive way. Okay, so the only thing that is matter is to recognize that there is a social norm, and to recognize that there is a social norms, we need to see those beliefs. We need to somehow find a way to make those beliefs come alive. Okay, along with beliefs, or basically we build upon those beliefs what we identify as a schema. The schemas are the categories. Okay, those are the buckets in which we identify what does it mean being a good wife. Okay, what does it mean being a good mother? Okay, and from those categories that are the schema, that are our bucket, we derive our script. As in any in a TV show or in a theater, we have a script, right? We follow what is written. So those categories inform us what we are supposed to do, to say, to decide. Okay. So if I have a social categories that identify the good mother as the one who stays at home, the script for that specific categories is going to be the woman is going to not coming back from work, as Melinda thought, and actually somehow did before building her foundation. Okay. So that is a script that a person should follow if she or he identifies with that scheme. And that scheme is based on particular specific beliefs that are factual, personal, or social. Is everything clear? So how do we, if we have to make some example, how do we identify those beliefs? First of all, I divide these beliefs and expectation let's say in two dimensions. So you have the vertical dimension, in which you have factual beliefs and personal normative beliefs. Those are the dimensions that are identified by the fact that those beliefs are your own beliefs. They do not depend on how other people think or do or expect anything from you. And this is on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you have all the beliefs that are called social, okay? So in the factual belief, what you are basically eliciting is the following. Why are you doing behavior A? And if it is the motivation of this behavior A, a factual belief, the answer of that person is going to be, I do it because it satisfies my need, because it satisfies a function, or I do it because this is the world in which live in. Why do you leave your job if you just got a child, a newborn? Because everyone in my office, every woman in my office left the job and never came back. This is the word. Then you can scratch a little bit the surface and see and try to figure it out whether these factual beliefs has actually a fundamental question also for the person herself. Do you believe that leaving the working place is the right thing to do? Yes, I left my working place because I think that is the best for me to stay with my child, and better than stay at home. This is what is morally right for me. So a mom should be with her child. Okay. Then we move to the social part. Let's see if in that behavior there are some other motivation. What do you think other people are doing in the same situation? If she answered to me saying, oh, actually everyone in my office, every woman in my office are basically decided to stay home. So nothing is going to happen to her, nor the owner is going to force her to come back, nor us. We are not going to force her to come back. So this is what usually other people do. So already, if you see there are like different, I'm adding more nuance to that behavior. It's not just because it is a factual belief. The person thinks also that is the right thing to do, but there is also something else. If I were to stop my reasoning to the personal beliefs, either factual or personal normative beliefs, I would have come to the consequences that person has a preference to stay at home. But if she says to me that everyone else in that same situation, in her working environment, is doing the same thing, maybe now I'm starting thinking that it's not just a preference, it is a social preference. It is something that is also driven not only by my personal one, but also by some information that I'm learning in my social network. And if I move to the last point, to the last quadrant, that is the normative expectation, and I would ask her, what would happen if you decide to come back? My husband, and if she answered to me, my husband is going to get mad, or my mother will cause me some sort of social cost, saying that I'm not a good mother. So it's a sort of sanction. Then I add another ingredient to the decision making of this person. That is, she really cares about what others do, but also she really cares about what other people think that she should do. And if she doesn't commit with their expectation, they are willing to punish her. So you see, a simple decision can have a completely different set of motivation. So if this is the case, if those are the situation, it might be possible that the person who is deciding to not coming to work after a pregnancy is deciding it not only because she thinks it's right, but also because there are like huge expectations on her on doing the right thing. And this right thing is basically what is the social norms on social norms driving that behavior, okay? So as I said, these 4 quadrants can be also summarized into this 4 dimension. We can have the independent behavior that is supported by factual and personal normative beliefs, from beliefs that are only mine. And then we have interdependent behavior, that is the behavior that depends on the action of the others, so the descriptive expectation, and depends also on the expectation that the others have on me. There are the social expectation. So this is the difference between these 4 quadrants in a vertical relation. In the horizontal relation, instead, what we have, we can characterize more these beliefs and expectation on the level, let's call it level, of openness, let's say. So the first two, the first two on the top, the factual and the descriptive expectation, given that they only are only belief about what is typical in the reference group, they are called descriptive norm. So they describe what is the rules of behavior in those particular situations. Whether they are factual or descriptive, they are only, or descriptive expectation, they are only prescribing what is in the society. Different stories we have when we look at personal normative beliefs and social expectation. They have another characteristics. Those are considered injunctive norm because they are shared beliefs about what is appropriate in my reference group. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so now I think, okay, no, there is the decision tree. So the example of the mother is basically can be reduced to this decision tree. I observe a behavior, okay? When I observe a behavior, I have to ask to the person that I'm investigating, is this person doing A because prefers to follow it no matter what the others do? So he has a behavior that is unconditional from what other people do, or this behavior is based on following the rules that other people are following. And in that situation, if in the first case, I reduce or I articulate my decision tree in 2 other questions. If the behavior is unconditional, okay, is unconditional, why this person is behaving as it is following that behavior? It's because it meets her, their, his need, so it is a custom, or because she thinks that is actually right following that action. And in that case, she's doing that behavior because the motivation is a moral norm. So I do it because I think I really think that is right. If we move to the conditional preference for that behavior, then we have to ask ourselves, so we know that she prefers to follow the behavior because she thinks that other people are doing it. But what are the specific motivation here? It is because there are empirical expectations that motivates this person to act in that way. So there are like enough people in my network, in my reference group, acting like that. So I'm following only a descriptive norm. Or she's following the behavior because she is also aware that she's not going to follow. She's going also to be punished. So she does that behavior, she follows that behavior because there are expectations from the others on her to do that behavior. And if she is not following that rules, she's going to be punished. So in that case, only in that case, you will have a complete social norm. Okay? it is a lot to take in, but I mean, I give you also a lot of references to read it at when you have time. So the social norms components, in a nutshell, are a shared menu of belief, okay, about the social, about the specific behavior, a reference group that are fostering and pushing that sort of shared beliefs. So people whose behavior and beliefs matter to me and to my behavior. So there are social norms that are intrinsically characterized into my working environment that are completely different from my family environment. It could be completely different from my larger social network environment. So if I change my reference group, it might be possible that my norm is going to change. And then the third characteristic that is important is the possibility of being sanctioned. If you are not sanctioned, so you are not going, if there are no consequences to you not following that behavior, that is not a social norms. If there are any kind of sanction, that could be not only physical sanction, but also economic sanction or social in terms of ostracism. If there are social sanctions, that is the social norms. If there are also those beliefs, okay, more or less. So I would like you to try the test, just to give you an idea. So I'm going to give you the Kahoot link with the code. You can access directly from your browser. Okay. So just give me a second. I'm going to share with you the link here in the chat. So www.kahoot, and the pin that you have to insert is the following one. So you enter, Kahoot asks you to add a pin. Okay, Federica is in. Okay, we are 6, 7. 8. Okay, I think we can start. Okay. Is everyone in? I guess so. Okay, so let's start. And I have to share my screen. So you have to look at the question here on the top, and you have to decide whether or not this sentence is basically a factual belief, personal normative beliefs, empirical expectation, or social expectation. Maria believes Thomas should control the use of a phone in their households. It is something that is based on empirical expectation as you see it, or a social expectation, or it is a factual belief, or something that I think that is actually morally right, or simply right to do it. So you have in front of your in your desktop, you have to choose one of the four. Okay. Factual belief red, personal normative belief yellow, empirical expectation blue, social expectation green. Good. That was the right one. Okay. So now I think the system. Okay. So let's go next. Next we. Oh wow. Here you have also the score of who was faster in replying. So good job, Ivana. The second, Pedro expects that most women will not maintain a bank account. This is a question on financial representation. What it is a factual beliefs, a personal normative beliefs, an empirical expectation, a normative one. Pedro expects that most women will not maintain a bank account. Other two answer to go. 7 and 8. Yeah, now I have to wait until the time goes on. What was your rationale on answering to this question? Someone? Okay, some 4 said the empirical expectation, that this is the actual right answer. Some personal normative beliefs and some others normative expectation. We can discuss why it is an empirical expectation because first of all, Pedro does not believe it expects a specific behavior, and the specific behavior is also common in many other women. So he expects that most women will not maintain a bank account. So it is some expectation that he somehow collected from his own expectation that give us a hint that it might be, this case, it might be described by by empirical expectations. Ivana? Okay, third, Lucas thinks that if he does not use violence, his friends won't consider him tough or mainly, or sorry, not mainly. It should have, sorry, it was supposed to be mainly from male. So what do we have here? A factual belief, normative expectations, empiricals, personal normative. Lucas thinks that if he does not use violence, his friends won't consider him tough or manly enough. Okay. How many are missing? Okay. So the correct answer is was a normative expectation. Why is that? Because first, the behavior here is not using violence. Okay, and he thinks that if he's not going to use a violence, they are going to somehow punish him. Okay, so his friends won't consider him tough or manly enough. So this is a punishment, like a social punishment. You are not worthy to be representing our male and empowered social group. Okay. Now Federica is is driving the contest. Fourth, in most society, working for pay is considered a masculine task, while unpaid care work is seen as a woman's domain, as a women's domain. What it is? It is a factual belief. So this is the way it is. It is an empirical expectation. This is how people do. It is a personal normative belief. This is what I think is right, or it is a normative expectation. It is a factual belief. Of course, these examples are also giving you a specific way of identify the words that you need to ask for each specific beliefs. So every time we ask them in most society or in general or in what you have seen around or in the newspaper, etc. All these way of wording the question are somehow identify that this might be a factual beliefs, okay? And first of all, and second of all, we don't have any sort of expectation here, no, in words. We only have a fact that is stated. So that is the way factual beliefs are elicited. Federica always on top. Luca is getting there. So Maria believes that other wives in the village believe that she should not report Enrique's behavior. It is a statement of the reality. It is a specific personal beliefs, or it is an expectation. It is an and if it is an expectation, it is based on what other people do or what other people expect me to do. It is a normative expectation. So it's not an empirical one. And why is that? And it's not even a personal normative one, because here I'm stating that she believes that other women, so the same in her reference group, other women in the village believe that she should behave in a specific way. So that is a normative expectation, and a double belief. So Dai believes, or Dewey believes, that wives should act respectfully towards, there is a typo again, husbands and family members. This might be a tricky one. Now I see that it might be a tricky one. Again, factual, personal, empirical, or normative. For answer 5, it is a personal normative beliefs. Good call. Let's see. Luca is there. Okay, the last one. Proper marriage is essential for a girl's economic and social security. Again, here we have an action that is stated as the proper one in terms of consequences on girls' life. There are 2 other people missing the contest. No one? 7? Yeah. Factual belief. Good. Okay, now let's go back to the. Okay. Eliana is the third. Sorry. This is important. Luca is the second, and Federica is the first. Wow, even with the lights. Okay, so let's go back here. So let's see let's see like a specific example. So if we look at child marriage problem, we can identify these problems through these beliefs and expectations. So the factual beliefs will be general statement on the behavior. So it is true that in India, for example, the older is the daughter, and the higher is going to be the dowry that the family has to pay for marrying them off. So this is actually an economic, given the fact that it's an economic transaction, and this economic transaction has a specific price, this is what happens. because the older daughter are less appreciated, so the price for marrying them off is increases. A second factual belief: younger child wives have better chance to find a good groom. And of course, the good groom is one of the script or the schema that is identifiable only in specific Indian society, especially in this paper of Bicchieri and et al. 2014. Personal normative beliefs. The parents can think as child marriage as a morally right thing to do for the well-being of their offspring. So it is not, we are not saying that their personal normative beliefs are not right, they are right, they are wrong. We have only to elicit them. At the same time, we know that child marriage is based on empirical expectations and normative expectations. And the empirical expectations are basically, they could come up with these sentences like, community members marry off their daughters young, most girls will marry before the age of 15. And the normative expectation that can come with positive or negative sanction are: community will disrespect the father, and in some cases ostracize the whole family in case he decides not to marry off her daughter at a young age. Gender-based violence. Factual beliefs. In some countries, men use aggression to solve conflict. This is a fact. This is something that you find also in data. So it's not open to conversation or debate. Okay. And we know, and sometimes it's also factual belief, the fact that the women do not talk back to their husbands. Then, of course, there are personal normative beliefs that sometimes support this behavior. So the presence of these gender-based violence. And those personal normative beliefs are, for example, women should or should not report intimate partner violence to the police. So I think that it's not right that the police know my personal business. So it is something that has to be held in my family boundaries. Okay. Of course, sometimes there are also empirical expectations. Other men in my community. So in that case, is a question that we do not ask to the women, but we ask to the men. And if they answer, other men in my community resolve internal conflict with violence, we already know that their use of violence is justified by the fact that this behavior, it is a behavior that it is common, okay, and it is expected. And if we find also that in case they do not follow the behaviors, other men are going to are willing to sanction the non-followers, then we have also normative expectation. For example, other men expect me to use violence to resolve conflict, or with the sanction, if I don't use violence, others won't consider them again. Mainly, I was a typo again. Another example, it could be the unpaid work. Factual beliefs. In most society, working for pay is considered, will you answer to this question? Is considered a masculine task, while unpaid care work is seen as as women's domain. Personal normative beliefs. Taking care of children and elderly is right. Empirical expectation. Other women juggle between work and care responsibility. So I expect other people to behave in that way. Or if I were a man, other men in my work or social groups are not involved in care responsibility. They don't care about dishwashing. They don't care about taking kids from school, etc. On this, actually, on this aspect, it was very interesting in the book of Melinda Gates, an episode that she reports saying that at a certain time she decided that these social norms that she imposed on herself, because Bill was utterly wove when she said that she wanted to quit the job. She decided that she didn't want to go to take the children to school. That at least Bill needed to do something. And it was very interesting that after Bill started going to school to pick the children up, after 1 week, also the fathers of the husbands of the other wives started going to pick their children up. what does it mean? It means that in terms of empirical expectation, you are increasing the fact that that possibility of a man as a Bill Gates going to pick his children at school, it is a completely normal. And if he can do it, then anyone else can do it. In that case, we have a role model, a male role model that somehow helped have the situation. And these episodes actually inform us that the role models do not have to be always the female one. We need also role models that are male. In fact, my husband-to-be, future husband-to-be, told me that it was not very kind of me to use only Melinda and Michelle as example of role models, because I should have add also Bill Gates and Obama. Anyway, normative expectations. Other men in my work or social groups think that the man's role is to support the family financially, and that's it. And if you are a stay-at-home dad, they are going to reproach you in somehow. So how do we elicit those beliefs and expectations? With the factual beliefs, we only have to ask a plain question. So how the world, how the society, for example, consider unpaid work. In the personal normative beliefs, instead we have to elicit this sense of obligation, of rightness, or approvedness, individual approvedness. Okay, do you think it is right to do A? Do you feel obligated to do B? Do you approve of doing C? When we instead want to elicit the empirical expectations, we want to identify what is the reference network we look at when we consider that behavior. So how many other people do you think will do the unpaid work? What do you think the majority of the responders in the case of a questionnaire, or what do you think the majority of your coworkers said about taking parental leave, for example? Or what would happen if most other people stop doing female genital mutilation? Those are all the empirical expectations that we use, empirical expectations elicitation that we use in order to understand what do we think about other people's behavior and how spread the behavior is in our society, in our reference group. And then we can elicit the normative expectation, asking the second order beliefs. So what do you think the majority of responders, the majority of coworkers believe mothers should do? And if you answer correctly, this is an important thing that usually we do when we do experiments, is that in order to make the respondent reliable in terms of truth telling, what we do is that we incentivize those questions. So we basically pushing the economist that is in their mind, in their soul, to gain money if they answer in the right way. And how can I know that they are answering in the right way? Because if many of them are telling me that their normative expectations are there, that means that your chance to get the money for answering correctly is going to increase. Another question would be, if you were not to do that behavior, what would happen to you? So that is the elicitation of a sanction, for example. Okay, why this is so important, and why from the individual and the social level we can move to the organizational and to the institutional level. How can we use the social norms in order to inform some policy design? And how can basically behavioral change, because when we talk about social norms and gender norms, we are asking for a behavioral change. How can this behavioral change being implemented with a policy making that look at the social norms? Let's see the case of female genital mutilation. And I'm going to introduce, generally, when we talk about behavioral change, we have these four approaches. We have a legal approach, economic approach, marketing approach, and behavioral approach. Those four approaches have been used in a separate way, not in the socio-economic, socio-ecological integrated way, okay? And that basically lead to some inefficiency, okay? Some inefficiency from the legal approach, some inefficiency from the economic, marketing, etc. So when we think about behavioral change, we need to integrate these three. So we need to come to the question of Maria Rita about the regulation and the social norms. We need to consider the legal approach needs somehow to be representative of specific social norms. Okay, let's start with the legal approach. In the legal approach, what we do is that we use the legal approach when the behavior is an harmful behavior, okay? It has a very high risk consequences for the society, or that behavior, it violates human rights. And we use always only the legal approach when the enforcement of those legal approaches, so the public sanctioning, it is feasible and cost effective. However, it's not sufficient only to use the legal approach when the behaviors are basically a subject of a collective action problem. That means that I need the collaboration of many people to see whether or not this behavior is bad. So I need that all women that are facing gender-based violence are going to report their husband, because if I don't see any report, that behavior it won't change. Okay, so I need for them collectively to report. At the same time, this is the collective action, so that we have to coordinate in order to get better. Okay. At the same time, when there are social norms that justify this behavior, it's very difficult that a legal approach, a new rule, is going to be considered legitimate. And if it is considered legitimate, if it is perceived illegitimate, basically is useless, because no one is going to report in that case. If I do think that being beaten, it is a social norms, and hence is right, and hence is expected from me to not report, is expect that my husband is going to beat me, then the fact that you are basically punishing a norm or a behavior that is widespread in my society is considered as an intrusion to my freedom, or a lack of understanding of the policymakers of the reality in which they intervene. And that was the problem with female genital mutilation for all these interventions, okay? In the sense that there were many interventions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 1 and 3, International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, the national legislation like in Guinea, Tanzania, Egypt, Iraq, but still, female genital mutilation is a practice, a harmful practice against the human rights that has been, that is still done in a specific country. Let's see, sometimes a policymaker thinks that also along with the legal approach, we need to improve somehow to apply the economic approach. When is necessary an economic approach? When the behavior is motivated by cost and benefits, or when there are incentives that can be somehow modified, okay? Of course, they are not sufficient when the preferences for that particular behavior is not only a preference based on economic reason, but is based on social norms. And of course, sometimes taxes or penalties that are basically the sanction of the economic approach are not very easily to be implemented. Okay, sorry, and sorry, I'm struggling with this. Okay, or another situation in which the economic approach is not sufficient is when there are different risks playing a concurrent responsibility in the behavior, and this is what happened again. Sorry. In the FGM. So here what we have is the intervention of the Salima campaign of Tostan. You have a link in the reference. What happened with Tostan was the following. They realized that FGM was instrumentally important for the economic for the marriage market. So basically, the marriage market in some countries are basically working as a normal economic market. So what they did, it was basically trying to figure it out. Where were the incentives there? Where were the economic incentives? Being cut means not only being poor, but means also, as in the child marriage example, it means also that the dowry is lower. So the Salima campaign, what they did, it was trying to change those incentives. So they tried to talk to the boys, basically. So they didn't, their intervention were not organized only for the girls, but also for the boys, and trying to figure it out whether or not their incentives to get married have changed with respect to their parents or their grandparents. And they found that actually the new generation didn't really actually care about the uncut. So for them, it was pretty, it was not even like a sort of marriage market there. Marketing approach. It is necessary when it is important to improve awareness, to learn, to improve learning, to improve decision making. And it's extremely necessary when it is combined with other policy tools. So we have a lot of the time, a lot of intervention in which we have legal approach plus marketing approach, or economic approach and marketing approach. It is not sufficient when the message that you are creating, it is conflicting with the core beliefs or the social norms of the society, where the is not sufficient when the people basically process those information in a biased way. And it is not sufficient when basically this information is just received in a passive way and is not put in an arena of deliberation. Sometimes what happens with the marketing approach is that we are imposing on other societies our own idea of what is good or what is right. And this is not the way to intrude in people's life. And this is the way in which basically many interventions, for example, of UNICEF, before they changed to social norms kind of communication, had problem with, because their way of communicating was a westernized way of communication. It was basically highlighting incentives that were not, they were completely Western, and they were not representative of the society in which they were building an intervention. That's why the Salima campaign of Tostan in Sudan was so important, because they use the same grammar of social norms, okay? Identify that, again, cut means pure. They worked on this idea of purity. They work with role models, or with how do you call it, with influencer, or influencer of the villages in which they operate, to trying to modify this idea, the meaning of purity, and also the consequences of that meaning. That was basically, pure is not identified by a cut that also has a very bad economic and social and health consequences, but is identified by a common idea of behavior. Another intervention that was extremely important, it was the edutainment, so education and entertainment activities all together. So creating some sort of soap opera in which can be represented some role models that are going to inspire and instill new way of decision making to the viewers. And then there is the behavioral approach. The behavioral approach also has its pros and cons. It is necessary when all the above are in troubles. Okay, so every time the legal, the economic, and the marketing approach are in trouble, behavioral approach can help. However, we cannot imagine an intervention only based on behavioral approach, because we really need the regulation. We really need the presence of incentives. And indeed, it is not sufficient when it is left alone. And also, it is not sufficient when the enforcement, it is overly difficult, especially when there is a lack of a collective commitment. And that's why the Salima project that used the social norm approach and evaluation was important, because they used the behavioral approach along with the approach of the policy making, of the UNICEF guys, and they were able to analyze the interdependency among people behavior and their ability to follow the social and also the ordinal rules. So I hope that this was also interesting for you to look how when we think about policy making, we need to figure out a way to gather together all these four approach together. Otherwise, we're going to somehow have a very inefficient consequences. A huge problem that we have when we talk about gender norms and social norms, of course, are data. So all the slides that I presented to you were basically slides coming from reports that the PennSong, the research group at UPenn did by themselves, and also with UNICEF. So they have the possibility to collect data, but not in let's say in a standardized way, through experiments, through field analysis, etc. There is a problem when we look at the data from a general perspective. Okay, first of all, there is a problem in the sense that the gender data among all the data sets that usually we use, especially in policy making, are basically are not represented. So there is a lack of sex disaggregated data and statistics. Okay, and of course there is a problem when we talk about social norms, expectations, and beliefs. There are none. Actually, there were none data before a few years ago on these topics. And this is a problem. It is a problem because we don't have gender data